Ivy said, my name is Cristina Miranda Palacios. I'm a social and community planner. And I am actually doing my PhD in history of Puerto Rico, and I'm concentrating on the impact of partisan politics on the development of social policies, particularly as they relate to municipalities. The League of Puerto Rican Cities was born after Hurricanes Irma and Maria, when mayors of both political parties, in coordination and in collaboration with organizations from the US as well as from Puerto Rico, decided to join together to identify solutions to issues that are faced by all of them, right? So after 2 years of collaboration, a lot of meetings, a lot of work, they decided in a visionary and historic move for Puerto Rico, which, as you know, is highly partisan in its efforts, they decided to consolidate and create the League of Puerto Rican Cities. So the League was born in October of 2019. I was hired as its executive director at the end of February. And the vision of the League of Cities is to unite local governments in a non-partisan effort to improve the quality of life of the Puerto Rican people. Our mission is to strengthen the capacity of local governments as well as communities. So as you can see, we have an agenda that's focused on municipalities, but recognizing that municipalities need to work in collaboration with the existing organizations that are part of their ecosystem. Is that okay? No. There's some feedback. Okay, so the League has 3 main values that were adopted by the mayors, and we are making sure that those values are integrated in all of our efforts, in our strategic plan, in the initiatives that we're designing and developing, and those are transparency and accountability, civic participation, and learning, collaboration, and leadership to serve the people. We have 5 main objectives, and those main objectives, the first one is the decentralization of efforts in Puerto Rico. I don't know if you know, but Puerto Rico is a highly centralized government. So there's a lot of things that should be happening and taking place and being decided at the municipal level that are decided at the state and the central government level. And the central government is too far removed from our communities and from our needs for them to understand the impact of the decisions that are being made. So at the moment, we're working on a decentralization proposal that is going to be based on a public policy analysis that I will show you in a little bit, and that will be validated by the members of our organization, and that will be presented to the candidates for governor and resident commissioners so that it can be adopted as part of their political platforms, which once whomever gets elected, and we don't know what's going to happen, it's part of their work plan. The second objective is promote public policies. We're working very closely with different organizations and groups on the promotion of public policies, fostering, of course, civic engagement and promoting new models of participatory governance. We want to make sure that Puerto Rico can properly access and maximize funds. I don't know if you've seen a report that it was published a while back by the Office of Management and Budget of Puerto Rico. It was commissioned to Estudios Técnicos, and it's a federal snapshot of the state of federal funds in Puerto Rico the year before ARRA funds, right? So they did a snapshot before ARRA. And the main 2 findings of that report is that we are the second jurisdiction in the US that deobligates the most money. So the money, the federal funding that we have tends to be deobligated, which means that we lose it and we can't get it back, and that we are almost the last jurisdiction in competing for federal funds. So the money that we have, we can't maintain, and the money that we need, we can't secure. And that's a big issue in Puerto Rico that it's further, it's further compounded by different issues that are happening in Puerto Rico. Like, for example, with the CDBG-DR funding, the decision was that those monies were going to be centralized. So in ignoring the way CDBG usually works, that goes to entitlement municipalities, everything is centralized. So it's a very difficult process to actually access those funding. And of course, sharing best practices and experiences, because we want to make sure that La Liga can serve as a community of learning, not only for municipalities, but for communities as well. We are a membership organization. At the moment, we are not charging a fee to participate because we're new and we want to make sure that we can increase content and our offer. Right now, we have 24 members and it's increasing, it's increasing on a weekly basis. It's always important to highlight that the League of Puerto Rican Cities, it's called the League of Puerto Rican Cities and not the League of Municipalities, because we want to make sure that we work for all 78 municipalities and its communities, and because we only have one country. These are some of our key partners and allies. Oxfam is our fiscal agent and sponsor. I'm right now at Oxfam's office. On the other side is ADI. They have been instrumental in supporting the growth and the development of La Liga, and without them, we wouldn't be here where we are right now. They're supporting us in an advocacy effort in Washington, D.C. with the U.S. Congress, so they have been really instrumental for us. Ford Foundation is our sponsor right now. They gave us the seed money. We're working with Open Society Foundations, and these are some of the organizations that we're working with the NLC, the National League of Cities. We are in the process of being certified as Puerto Rico's state lead agency for the NLC, because while there are 2 organizations in Puerto Rico that group mayors, those organizations are partisan based and they can't be the state leads. And those are some of our other partners. We have assumed a role in advocacy and action with the Fiscal Control Board. Those are some of the letters that we've sent the board regarding the imposition of austerity measures by the board. Right now, we're actually hiring a law firm to sue the board and to sort of like in terms of the constitutionality of some of the initiatives that they're taking, like basically a taking of municipalities. So we're very active with the Fiscal Control Board. We're also recruiting new members. And as I mentioned a while back, we're running a very interesting advocacy campaign in Washington, D.C. So that's something because we want to make sure that people in Washington know about us, know about La Liga, that we're here, that we're a voice for municipalities, and that we're also a resource so that they can contextualize whenever they're, doing or designing projects. This is part of a snapshot of a public policy historic analysis that we completed and that we are still revising. We decided to start in 1991 because that was when the municipal autonomous law was passed. So that's why we started in 1991, and of course 2020, which is the current year, ending with the approval of the municipal code, which is a consolidation of all the laws related to municipalities. It's a very heavy document that we're still reading, but it had input from municipalities, from the mayors. So, mayors tend to be fairly satisfied with the document, but it's going to take a while people read it, analyze it, and understand the consequences of this municipal code. It's important to highlight that the law that was passed in 1991, the municipal autonomous municipality law, is the law that has been amended the most in Puerto Rico. I think it's received over 230 amendments, and only one of those amendments was to grant more resources to municipalities. And that amendment was then eliminated in another change. So it's just because we want to make sure that people understand that municipalities are always facing the imposition of unilateral measures from the central government to eliminate resources for them. We want to give you some municipal context about the way municipalities operate. I think the best example is always the road. Whose is it? When you're driving in Puerto Rico and you hit a hole in the street, people always think about the mayor. But what people don't know is that many of the roads are actually owned by the state government, and municipalities are assuming their maintenance without the delegation of funds. So this is just an example of part of the work that we want to do, that we want to foster a conversation so that people in Puerto Rico understand the difference between the central government and the municipal government, and when responsibilities start and where they end. So I always, when people tell me about a hole, I'm like, who owns it? There's also some, there's a lot of information in Puerto Rico. There's like they're not enemies because we're actually working with ABRE right now, but there's a narrative in Puerto Rico, this perception of inefficiency that we believe is anchored in a lack of knowledge about how municipalities actually operate and how they're financed and what their role is. So this, for example, is a publication by Puerto Rico ABRE. They have the municipal index where they give a report card for municipalities from A to F. Myself, I don't really like scorecards that much, but we have issues with this, with the way that AGRE is doing this, because they're only doing a financial analysis of seeing how much money the municipality had when the year started and how much they had when the year ended. So we had a meeting with the board a couple of weeks ago, and some of our mayors of the board were in the meeting, and one of them said, you know, you gave me a B and I had an A last year, and you took points because I reduced my super avid. The savings that I had to reduce, but you didn't ask why there was that reduction. The reduction is the result of me offering essential services to my community and my constituents as a result of the hurricanes and the earthquakes. So what we're doing right now with Puerto Rico Abre is that we're working with them, and we're going to be hosting some focus groups with mayors and staffers so that they can understand the context of how municipalities are financed, so that we can strengthen the report card that they have. There's this perception that permeates a lot of people that municipalities are subsidized by the central government. And really that perception stems from an incomplete and decontextualized analysis. And we always say this because it's sort of like what happens with community-based organizations when you hear people from the central government say, oh, you know, that organization should be self-sustainable. I shouldn't be supporting everything that they do. But what they don't understand is that that's really a transfer for the provision of services, because community-based organizations and nonprofit organizations are assuming the role that the government is not completing. So they need the funding that the government has. The same thing happens with municipalities, that delegation of funds, it's really a transfer for the provision of services. Things that are always important to remember is that municipalities are the closest governmental entity to the community. I am a municipalist at heart. I really, as a planner, I've been working with municipalities for almost 14 years in Puerto Rico. I love working with mayors. They can be difficult, but I really believe that change in Puerto Rico will come through municipal governments, because again, they are the closest governmental entity to the community. So this idea that you can save money by consolidating municipalities does not take into consideration the cultural component of that decision, the impact that it will have on the community. And it's always usually based on joining the big municipalities with the smaller municipalities, as if the bigger the municipality, the better its finances, and that's not always the case. It's also important to remember that municipalities have assumed the provision of services, but without the delegation of authority or the delegation of funds, and that despite the lack of resources and the constant imposition of unilateral measures, municipalities have continued to provide those essential services. In La Liga, as well as in the municipalities, they probably won't say that they operate under these two models, but this is what they do. We work from the ecologic model, understanding that if we want to make a change, we have to impact at the individual level and all the way up to the public policy level. And of course, the social determinants of health model that, it's basically stating in order to impact a person from the community, you have to understand the ecosystem and all of those things that are part of that person, from agriculture and food production, living and working conditions, work environment. We just completed a municipal radiography. It's an analysis of what our financial numbers say. We did a comparison of the 78 municipalities looking at their financial audited statements from 2015 to 2018. And the reason why we didn't do 2019 is because of the earthquakes, an extension was granted. So those are being submitted as we speak. And we found, we were able to evidence where does the money come from, right? How do municipalities get financed? So there are four main income sources for municipalities. The first one is the CRIM, which is the property tax in Puerto Rico, and the CRIM is a structure that is supposed to owe itself to municipalities, but that it's heavily controlled by the central government. Patents, it's 20%, EVU, which is our sales tax is 10%, and then other sources like federal funding, it's the 10%. So all of those, the first three income sources in the list CRIM, patents, and EBU are heavily controlled by the central government. So the municipality has no control over them in terms of the exemption or when it can be applied or when it can be waived. We also found that between 2015 and 2018, municipalities were able to reduce their income by almost 15%, while the central government only registered a reduction of 4.87%. So that's important to highlight that, because they're always saying municipalities spent a lot of money, you know, they have these big budgets and they have all this money and they're spending, and the central government is doing all these cuts. Well, this evidences the fact that we were able to reduce, that they had to reduce their income by 3 times what the central government did. And they were also able to adjust their expenses by almost 12%. We presented this to Natalie Yaresco and the board and her staffers, and her reaction was, well, if you had a reduction of 15% and you only in income, but you were only able to adjust less than 12%, then you failed. And what we told her was, well, you're looking at only the numbers, you're not looking at the people behind the numbers. It's not like we can eliminate, all the essential services that I provided, because our community needs this. And they were able to do it because they had savings. And this is, one of the other findings. They went from surplus to deficit from 2015 to 2018. Municipalities had to adjust for the balance of the loss of income, and it ended with a negative change of minus 324.34%. So that means that the municipalities ate the savings that they had. When it comes to savings, it's important also to share with you that the board right now has a pilot program for municipalities, and it's a taking of the municipal governments and the decision and everything that they do. And one of the things that they did is, for municipalities that had a superávit, they froze that and they told the mayors, you cannot use that money. You can't use that money, even though it's money that is owned by the municipality. They also imposed a 20% reduction of their budget across the board without a conversation or anything, as well as the elimination of previously negotiated things with employees, like bonus, vacation days, etc. So that's one of the things that it's part of our legal component of strategy of what we're doing. The other thing that is important to also highlight is that in terms of debt, municipalities pay their debt a year in advance. So when PROMESA was enacted, and it's always important to remember, the fiscal plan is not done by the board. The fiscal plan is done by the central government. The board approves it, but the fiscal plan is a creature of the state. So municipalities were paying their debt. Yet the central government decided to include municipalities and the University of Puerto Rico, that was also paying their debt, in the fiscal plan, and that's when the problems escalated. So what we found is that in 5 years, municipalities will be able to reflect a reduction of 54% of their debt with no restructuring and while still providing essential services. So this is just to highlight that municipalities are actually complying with their responsibilities. And this is it's a panoramic view. Of course, there are municipalities that are doing better than others, and that's part of the work that La Liga will be doing. I always like to ask, is a municipality supposed to be self-sustainable? Because we always hear this, municipalities should be self-sustainable, but the question that should follow is, can a organization that's focused on the provision of essential services be sustainable? This is like saying that the government should be sustainable, and the government is sustained by the income that we pay. And that's the other important thing that we want to foster in the conversation. Where does our money go as taxpayers, as constituents? So this is everything that we pay to the central government: income taxes, corporate taxes, sales tax, gas tax, the tire, the new car vehicle tax, the cell phone, all those things that we pay. We have a financial advisor that did an analysis of Cabo Rojo. He took Cabo Rojo as an example, and he found that Cabo Rojeños and Cabo Rojeñas paid the central government, I think, an excess of $70 million in taxes. And from those $70 million, what came back to the municipality was less than $7 million. So where is the disparity in the formula there? The other big issue being faced by municipalities right now is the elimination of the misnamed subsidy. And it's a subsidy that was granted by the state for property taxes. So that will be enacted in 2023. If that happens, we are looking at the disappearance of 43 municipalities, because we're thinking that if the municipalities that retain 80% of their budgets are the ones that will survive by 2023, we're looking at the disappearance of 43 municipalities. And everything that entails that disappearance is something that people are not talking. So we always like to ask, what would happen if municipalities cease to exist? What would happen? So all of these essential services that are provided by municipalities wouldn't exist, right? Or they would have to be assumed by the central government or by somebody else. At the end of the day, somebody will always have to do the work. Municipalities tend to do it cheaper because they can maximize and they can leverage resources that they have. So all of that would disappear. We are in La Liga are proposing permanent solutions. We want to make sure that we can regionalize the CRIM with the regional board of directors. We're working on a decentralization proposal that will be presented, that is being developed and drafted with participation from civil society and other partners. We have a lot of people that are interested in participating with us. And the idea is that it will be presented, as I said a while back, to the candidates and also endorsed by the Fiscal Control Board, because the reality of Puerto Rico is that they are the ones that govern. What we're doing, what we have in process, we are working on a capacity building and technical assistance to municipalities and communities. We are going to repeat a very successful webinar that we had last week on blight and public and properties in Puerto Rico. So that will take place next week. So it's free, you can join. It's super exciting and super interesting. We're also completing a report on the serious and the municipal radiography, because we want to make sure that we have content that we can share with people so that we can spread the knowledge on how municipalities are financed and how they work. We're working on a decentralization proposal. We're going to be hosting forums with political candidates. And of course, we're working with key allies and partners. We are also developing a pilot project for the COVID municipal response with people from the health sector in the private sector, as well as academia and stuff. And of course, we're also pushing for collaborations with a purpose. We want to make sure that if we establish a collaboration with a partner, it has to be a collaboration that's driven and that can move us towards our objectives, that it's centered in the development of capacity, that is collective centered, that it has a purpose, and that it's anchored also in our values. To finish, I always believe that working on behalf of municipalities really translates into working on behalf of the most marginalized communities in Puerto Rico. It's a way to make sure that the communities that need it the most have access to the resources that they need. So that's what we believe. So it's an idea. We're open for new collaborations and excited to see if you have any questions or comments. That's my email right there. I can put it on the chat if it's easier. And I did it in 21 minutes because I put my timer.